Every 84 years or so, Uranus enters Gemini, and every time it does, the world invents new ways to share information and uses its new communication savvy to fight for freedom. The printing press, the telegraph, the computer, now AI. Uranus isn't subtle. It's a bolt of lightning striking to disrupt what no longer works. Now, Gemini, a sign of duality, has been flattened into binary: good, bad, male, female, with us, against us. But Gemini is so much more than binary. Gemini has the ability to hold multiple truths at once. Now, every time Uranus moves through Gemini, something massive breaks through in the way we communicate, organize, and free ourselves from the social constructs of the time. Hello, binaries. This time, Pluto's in Aquarius, the community first sign, breaking down the old structures of power and making room for the collective. The pattern is here, it's emerging. And we look to the past not to be victims of its mistakes, but to hear the rhymes so we can choose an alternate future we desire. There's no room for fate here, okay? We don't use astrology for fate. The breakthrough has never belonged to a lone genius. It belongs to all of us, the collaborative, to the circle shakers, to the change makers, to the ones willing to reach across the divide. So, I know you're here because you are a change maker. Let's dive into this episode where we're going to trace the history, naming the invitations, and mapping the next 8 years so you and your people can shake up your circles and disrupt the status quo. Welcome back, Star Powered family. And if you're new here, aloha and welcome. I'm Leslie Tagorda, Hawaii born astrologer, author of the upcoming book, Astrology for Changemakers, coming out in September 2026, and creator of the Astrobrand Method. I light the path for visionaries, healers, and changemakers like you to attune to your strengths, purpose, and power written in your stars. If astrology, leadership, and real change through an uncolonized lens are your jam, click subscribe. Hi, Changemaker. It's Leslie Tagorda, your brand and leadership astrologer. Thank you so much for joining in again today for another episode of Star Powered. Last year, when Uranus dipped its toes into Gemini, giving us a little foreshadow of what it had in store for us, I had an episode, and it's a little bit of the same, but a little bit different. I wanted to really kind of trace and recognize some of these patterns even more deeply in the different historical eras of Uranus in Gemini. But of course, we are not really changing history. We're part of history. So I really want to focus this episode also on just how you can interpret Uranus going through Gemini in your chart to hear the invitations to, yes, shake up your circles. That's my theme for Uranus and Gemini, and I'll tell you why. And really talking about your invitation to break through and disrupt for all of us this upcoming 8 years. Of course, we'll end this episode with what your astrology is inviting you into. We'll take a look at how to interpret Uranus through your different houses. And if Uranus in Gemini is aspecting any of your natal planets, how you can hear those invitations. Let's get started. Before we dive into what's new, what's going on, what's going to happen in my life, right? I want to reflect back a little bit over the last 8 years since May 2018 as Uranus has been traveling through Taurus. Because oftentimes when we're always so looking forward as to what's going to happen, what's on the horizon, that we forget to take stock, to feel gratitude, to reflect on everything that has evolved, has shifted, has revolutionized, and has broken through. Because, like 8 years, this last 8 years, it hasn't been static. I mean, lots of things happen. But, Uranus, and we'll talk deeper about the Uranus's process to change, to awaken. Uranus has been disrupting Taurian themes since May of 2018. Of course, Taurus is a fixed earth sign. Uranus does not like being in fixed earth. In fact, some astrologers say that Uranus is in its fall in Taurus. So, like these last few days of Uranus in Taurus Taurus is a really good time to reflect back on all of the challenges that have really shaken you up, disrupted you, not so much to just be, a thorn in your side, but really to put you on a new path. A disruption happens, again, not just to be annoying, not just to be chaotic, but actually to put you on your path. I love Uranus. It's a breakthrough energy, it's a freedom energy. And so I want you to take a look back at the 8 years, like, go back into your calendar, your journal back to 2018, and start to notice what has shifted for you. Now, when we think about revolution, I talk about revolution quite a bit because revolution isn't just about changing things and shocking things and like making things brand new. But like when you have your birthday every year, we call this a solar return and we celebrate the revolution that we've had around the sun. And it's also a revolution is a coming back to, but a coming back to not exactly at the same level, but on a spiral journey. And hopefully your spiral is moving upwards or outwards or, looking at growth, but you never return back to the exact same spot because you have learned a whole year of lessons. You have gained a whole year of perspectives in your solar return. So when we think back at the last 8 years of Uranus in Taurus, I want you to ask yourself, how have your values changed? How have your internal idea of your self worthiness, self value changed? How has your relationship to your physical resources, your abundance, and your money have changed? Hopefully, we're on the upward spiral, and, like hopefully that your values have gotten clearer. Hopefully, your certainty of your worthiness and your inner value has increased. Hopefully, you have noticed all of the abundance that is available to you, even if money goes up and down, or maybe your relationship to money has changed. Now, of course, those are your Taurian ideals. You can also check through your houses what has changed for you. Now, when I look back at this that Uranus in Taurus, I'm really quite amazed at what happened for me over the last 8 years because at the end of 2018 is exactly when I started becoming a professional astrologer, where you might have heard this story before, but I've had a web and branding business since 2004. I've been doing this for a long time. Yes, I have. Um, and I wanted to burn my entire business down. But in that moment of identity crisis, I opened up my chart. I looked at my natal chart and I saw an entire brand framework based on astrology. We have, of course, all of the different planets playing their different roles, but more importantly, we had our leadership style by our rising sign. We had our sun, which is our differentiating zone of genius. We had our moon helping us make decisions so that we could take risks in a better way. All of this was already written in our stars. And so I remember 2018 being such a pivotal year. Literally, the what Uranus did for me was say, like, I want to burn this down. I want to take a lightning bolt and just like burn it all down. But instead, I came back to revolution, my lifelong love of astrology. I had been self-taught, so I never thought of myself that I could ever be a professional astrologer. But instead, I decided to also change and shake up astrology and use it from a branding perspective. So I am super grateful for the last 8 years with Uranus moving through Taurus, which moved through my 11th house, and now it's firmly in my 12th house. Because it really was a spiritual revolution for me because I came out of the closet as a spiritual entrepreneur. Back before 2018, I never talked about astrology or my new moon rituals or any of that. I was petrified to share that part of me. And so much has changed in the last 8 years. So I'm very, very grateful for what Uranus in Taurus has taught me in terms of what I value, how I see my worthiness, and yeah, physical resources. My business has like definitely grew and increased since I started bringing in astrology into my business. So, what is this for you? It's such a perfect time. Spending the time to reflect shows you the changes that you have made. It shows you the skills that you have gained. It's such an important tool. So, before Uranus moves into Gemini once and for all during our lifetimes, please take a look and spend, 5 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, at what has happened for you since May of 2018. And thank Uranus in Taurus for shaking up your values, your worthiness, and your physical resources. Let's dig in a little bit deeper to the planetary process of Uranus. Now, all of these planets that we have are processes of change. Yes, they all transform. To transform is to change, but how they do it is a little bit different. So Uranus, of course, we touched at the little surface. Uranus's process is to break through. It disrupts, it revolutionizes. And its primary role in this change process of breakthrough is to awaken. So just like your computer might upgrade, or, I know like being woke is not really like a beautiful thing to say, but when you think of somebody who is woke, it's like they have like their eyes are open, they hear the truth, they know who they are. And so how wonderful is it to awaken? Maybe it's a spiritual awakening, maybe it's an emotional awakening, whatever that, maybe it's a sexual awakening, whatever that awakening is. It's like all of a sudden you're open to it, you're free from whatever traps had held you back before. Now, Uranian process, like a lightning bolt, you don't know where that lightning bolt is going to strike, and it might strike in one place, but then zap a whole area. Maybe a lightning bounces around, maybe it touches the toppest peak. We don't know where this lightning bolt is going to strike. Just like a quantum leap. You can have an idea where you might want to land, but you don't know. It's not like a Saturn process where Saturn is very much like linear. We need to do A, then B, then C. There's all these dependencies. I was talking to my operations manager earlier today, and we are talking about dependencies. What has to happen first, second, third? When all I want to do is quantum leap. I just want to wiggle my nose and have it be done, and be so wonderfully surprised. And so when we lean into Uranus, it can help us quantum leap. And so, of course, in the way that I look at astrology with the astrogram method, we have this inner part of ourselves, the inner awakening that has to happen, where we, look at our shadows, we do the deep emotional and spiritual work so that we can support the outer expression, our change making, our leadership, our brand, our business, our entrepreneurship. They both go together, the inner awakening and the outer expression. And so Uranus, when it's working on its inner awakening, it's really looking at how we can break free from different societal structures, from different, conditioning and education and all of the shoulds. Uranus is here to break free from all of those internalized, inherited traps or shackles that hold us in. Now, I was talking, I'm doing a online summit that's coming right up, and registration is still available. So take a look in the show notes. I'm doing the Reclaim Retreat with Jenner from We Are Wild. And, we just like had this like kismet, just really like just energy that was just so connected. When I think about Uranian energy, to me, this is the epitome of rewild. For all of my clients who really come to this word, rewilding, reclaiming, to me, they all have this very Uranian flavor. And you can see it actually in their charts, this rewilding, reclamation. And when I think about that rewilding reclamation, especially from an inner awakening perspective, it's like you're coming back to your natural selves. When you think of rewilding or reclamation, oftentimes you might think of a crop. If you think of a GMO crop, a crop that has been genetically modified, it has been modified so that it produces more, it has sweeter, sweeter fruit, grows faster, grows in these terrible conditions. It like fights off, these different kinds of pests. And that modification is just like us being conditioned. Be thin, be pretty, be smart, be aggressive, be nice, smile, whatever the inner conditioning is for you. And so when we rewild like a plant that has been GMO'd, and then we all of a sudden like we're just gonna buy forage, or we're gonna buy wildcraft, or we're gonna look for heirloom tomatoes and heirloom apples. We're coming back to these different crops that haven't been modified by people, but only been modified through evolution. And so if you're rewilding or reclaiming right now, definitely sign up for that free retreat, the Reclaim Retreat. I'll have the link in my show notes. But remember that this is part of our Uranian process of inner awakening, to do the inner awakening to free ourselves from this social or inherited family, cultural conditioning, and to disrupt, right? To do something differently. Because when we're able to break free and disrupt and shake up all of these preconditioned societal, status quo expectations, this is when we can do our real work in our leadership through our outer expression, where we can break through, where we can innovate, where we can revolutionize, where we can fascinate, where we can quantum leap. Now, if I hadn't back in May of 2018, if I hadn't done my own inner awakening in terms of breaking free, like who's going to believe an astrologer? Who's going to like take an astrologer seriously? Who's going to like hire a person who's talking about all of their woo-woo rituals that they do? I had to decondition myself from that in order to bring astrology into my work. And not only did I bring astrology into my work, but I brought it into branding. I brought it into leadership. And in a way, I revolutionized astrology. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't done my own inner awakening. And so this is possible for you when we use Uranus. Now, we're going to go through Uranian transits through our lifetime. Of course, you probably already know our biggest midlife transit, the Uranus opposition that completely disrupts and breaks old patterns. We're going to be talking at the end of the episode about how Uranus goes through different houses and how it really does some of the breakthrough with different personal planets. Now, fun fact about Uranus is that as the disruptor and the revolutionary, it's the only planet that revolves on its side, on its equator, tumbling eclectically, unlike any of the other planets that revolves on its north-south axes. So let's take a look at the Gemini power. Now, the Gemini power is probably one of the most judged signs because of its shadows. It's two-faced, it's too chatty, it's unreliable. But these are actually gifts that are completely miscommunicated and misunderstood. Gemini is a mutable sign, meaning that it is adaptable, it can change, it can synthesize new information. And Gemini's answer is not usually yes or no, it's like yes and. As an air sign, Gemini is here to gather and disseminate information in a social setting of like-minded community. Of course, Gemini represents, your closest neighbors, it's your childhood, it's your siblings, it's your closest cousins. And so when we think about that idea of like who lives in our neighborhood, I hope you know your neighbors. Thinking back maybe to like ancient times, of course you would know your neighbors because you probably likely never left like a 2 mile radius of your home. Your closest friends were your cousins because that was your uncle's children or something like that, your aunt's children, and of course your siblings. And so in previous times, not so much today, but just to bring that metaphor, Gemini is really about your like-minded community, people who already act like you, already have similar beliefs as you. And it doesn't mean that like you're going to think completely 100% alike, like in a cult or something. That's not what I'm saying. And so this air sign with Gemini, it's a social sign. It wants information, it wants all of the fun facts, all of the details, and then it uses its chattiness to disseminate it. That's why my favorite power of Gemini, yes, is self expression, but more than that, it's about cross pollinating. Gemini is that busy bee. It is the butterfly of the archetypes. I don't know if you know this about pollinators, whether you're a bee or a hummingbird or a moth or a butterfly. These individual creatures are so evolved to find their very specific pollinator plants that like the plants are communicating with these different pollinators saying like, I've already been pollinated, or come back tomorrow, or a bee can do its like little waggle dance in its hive and say, go 20 degrees north and then go over like the lavender bush and you're going to see all of these this blueberry patch that needs to be pollinated. Like the details that these plants, the pollen and the pot, their associated pollinators are sharing is this giant, vast web that us humans and scientists have only been recently discovering just their fascinating ability to share complex information. Now, you and me as change makers with Gemini about cross pollinating is to know who our people are, but to share information, to show up at the conference, to show up at the co working spot, to show up at the networking event, and not to sit back and just be a wallflower, but to actually go around, share what you do, share what you need, share how you can support others, share your perspective, share your values, because ultimately when you share and express these parts of you, you're going to connect to new people. And when new people connect and share their ideas, guess what? Innovation happens. And so with Gemini, your job is to be the busy bee, cross pollinating, holding multiple truths. So, yes, and like you can like this and this, you can be this, and to express yourself. And so when we look at the Gemini archetype along with Uranus, a pattern emerges. Uranus's need for freedom to break free, to break through a threat of duality, of binary black and white thinking, black and white social constructs. We're going to see this as it moves through history. And then also Uranus in Gemini, with Gemini being the communicator, Gemini sharing information. We see that, of course, Uranus is a planet that is always associated with technological advances. Well, Uranus and Gemini shows us technological advances in communications, and relaying information. So let's take a look at some of the historical eras of Uranus in Gemini so we can see these patterns, these two patterns of breaking free from a thread of duality and technological advances in communications so we can start putting this pattern together and deciding how we might want to use this pattern for us over the next 8 years. Okay, let's take a look at a few historical eras of Uranus in Gemini. And I apologize in advance that I'm going to be looking at this from a very US centric version of history. I know that Uranus in Gemini affects us all over the world, but I'm going to be focusing on a few things of US history. And the reason why that the US, the United States, is so impacted by Uranus and Gemini is because the US has a natal Uranus in Gemini at 8 degrees. You can take a look at the Sibley chart for the formation of United States, of course, on July 4th, Cancer, Pluto in Capricorn, late degrees of Capricorn. I mean, we are not only going through a Pluto return, have gone through a Pluto return, but we're also going through a Uranus return. So remember, Uranus takes about 84 years to go around the sun. And so every time Uranus comes into Gemini, it triggers a Uranus return for the United States. And when Uranus not most of us, like some of us, maybe you have had a Uranus return. Most of us listeners, just from the demographics that I already know about my community, we've experienced or are experiencing our Uranus opposition. And we know what that feels like. It feels like we want to tear the skin off of ourselves. We are changing. Maybe we are women and going through perimenopause. Those Uranus oppositions really change our ability to speak up for ourselves. It activates our throat chakra. That's a whole nother episode, by the way. But when we have a Uranus return, we are returning again, rewilding and reclaiming our natural selves, but it has to be at a different level. We have to break through somehow. And so the US is always impacted by a Uranus in Gemini, and it's looking at freedom of information and speech, totally baked into the natal DNA of the United States. And it is always under pressure during the 8 years that Uranus is moving through Gemini. So let's take a look back to 1774. Now, yes, we'll go back in history a little bit to the American Revolutionary War. This is the war that the pre-United States, the colonies of the United States had with Britain to have political and financial independence from the crown and wanting to establish its own self-governance. Now, at the time, Uranus and Pluto were in an out of sign trine. Uranus was in Gemini, but Pluto, instead of being in Aquarius like it is now, was in late Capricorn. But a trine with Uranus break through and Pluto break down. There's support there. Now, Saturn and Neptune, I want to bring in some of these outer planets because Saturn and Neptune, remember earlier this year, we had our conjunction of Saturn and Neptune at the 0 degrees of Aries. Well, guess what? In 1774, when Uranus was in Gemini at the time of the Revolutionary War, Saturn and Neptune were also conjunct this time in Virgo. And so the focus here, the freedom focus during the Revolutionary War, again, political independence. We are not a colony of Britain. We don't want to pay taxes. We want to have representation. We want to have our own leadership and self-governance. And so that freedom from an imperial ruler. And of course, the technological breakthroughs all the way back in 1774 was the invention of short distance telegraphs. So telegraphs couldn't go very, very far, but this is the first time that people were sending messages through a telegraph where you didn't have to use a horse, you didn't have to use somebody running, you didn't have to use any people power. It was just through electrostatic telegraphs. So we got to start somewhere. And the invention of the printing press. Well, with the invention of printing press, literacy rates have to go up because everybody is printing little pamphlets, little newspapers, little revolutionary ideas that were spreading like wildfire through different networks. Okay, so put those little markers, that little historical pattern in your mind. So fast forward 84 years, we come to 1858, where the United States is yet in another war. This time, a civil war, the war between the North and the South. This time, when Uranus is in Gemini, Uranus is conjunct Jupiter in Gemini. And at the time Uranus moves into Gemini, we have a trine with the moon in Aquarius. Do you see a pattern here? Pluto is currently in Aquarius. And so the moon was in Aquarius. So we have this Aquarian trine. Now, Pluto itself was in Taurus, and Saturn and Neptune, they weren't in conjunction anymore, but they were also in trine. And so when we have all of these outer planets making some kind of rhythmic rhyme here, we have our freedom focus on human and narrative freedom. Of course, you know, the Civil War was about Abraham Lincoln. It was about the North and South. It was about abolishing slavery, breaking free from enslavement, a nation divided by two binary, opposing, polar opposite truths. The two incompatible stories about what America was. Okay. And so the Civil War defined freedom through several specific liberties. Now, of course, we had freedom from enslavement, the 13th Amendment that was created in 1865, formally abolished slavery throughout the United States. Another freedom movement was free labor. This was the idea that individuals should have their right to own their own labor and create their own economic opportunity to improve their social standing. Not everybody, even, besides the enslaved people, we had other poor people that were really fighting to own their own labor and create economic opportunity for themselves. And lastly, we have the political participation. The 15th Amendment sought to protect the freedom to vote regardless of race or previous servitude. And so the Civil War was also really defined from this freedom from binary thinking. Now, of course, we had technological breakthroughs that was helping create these different amendments, helping disseminate information so that more people would understand and know that they were now free people. And these technological breakthroughs included the transcontinental telegraph. So people being able to speak from north to south, people being able to send messages from east to west. And so messages were going further in quicker amounts of time, as well as the transatlantic telegraph, thanks to a submarine cable. And photography. The Civil War was the first war where we had wartime photography, and photographers were using these photos to show what was actually happening on the battlefields, just the violence and the horrendous wartime atrocities to impact the public perception of the war. This was the very first time we were seeing these images in 1858. Okay, freedom and technology, put that in your mind. Let's fast forward at 84 years to 1942, World War II. Now, this war was a little bit different because the first two wars were very internal wars, wars being fought in on the United States land, on North America land. And World War II, now we were fighting external opponents. Now, when Uranus moved into Gemini in 1942, Uranus now was conjunct Saturn in Gemini. And Uranus and Saturn were trine again Neptune. Pluto here was now in Leo, opposite of where it is now. And so that Uranus in Gemini was sextiling Leo, the Pluto Leo. Okay. So we still have all of these planets all making these aspects together with Uranus over and over and over again. So I'll leave this up to you to look up the charts and you can take a look at the different symbolism of these different trines and come to your own interpretations. So, this time in 1942, of course, freedom fighting was absolutely the ideal, the ideological and global message to fight for freedom, to bring the United States into this World War II. Of course, remembering that the United States officially entered the World War II after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And this focus was breaking free from tyranny, from fascism, from Mussolini in Italy, from Hitler in Germany. There was so much concern that all of this fascism was going to not only take over Europe, but then also then going to impact the United States. So President Roosevelt created his Four Freedoms speech shortly before in 1941, as everything was already building, the pattern was already emerging. And his four freedoms were freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship, freedom of want, and freedom from fear. Obviously, the fear was directly related to the tyranny and fascism. Of course, freedom of speech and expression wasn't for everyone, although it was sold as for everyone in the world. But of course, the reality was who could speak freely was reliant and shaped on legal restrictions and social inequalities of the time. However, this is how Roosevelt really inspired the United States citizens to prepare for war. And, you can see these, you hear these rhymes again speech and expression, worship, want, and fear. Now, the technological advances that happened at this time were the first programmable electronic computer, the radio that was transmitting propaganda, transmitting communications and coordinations, the radar to see the unseen, to be able to track ships and airplanes, allowing for a new vision. And of course, the transistor that was invented in 1947, which laid the foundation for all modern microelectronics. And so, do you hear these themes again? This desire from freedom, from an oppressive social construct, and this advance in technology that helped us share communications and disseminate information. Well, let's fast forward to now. And so, if you want to think about this on your own, not just taking what I say, I want you to think about what are you fighting for? What freedoms are you fighting for, especially as it comes from a social construct that is feeling very oppressive, a binary thinking of like what's right and what's wrong. What are you fighting for? And look at the technological advances that are happening this time around. Of course, AI. And so this time, our world is a little bit different. This time in the astrology, we have Uranus trining in Gemini, trining Pluto in Aquarius. This time, we also have Jupiter in Cancer that is squaring off with Mars and Mercury in Aries. Is this going to be an information war this time? I mean, I think you know it is, right? No predictions, but we're looking at like what is the energy ripe for. The one thing that I am hopeful with as Uranus re-enters Gemini for this once and final time on April 26th is that Uranus has a conjunction with Venus. Venus and Uranus in Gemini, there's a softening with Venus, there's a bonding, there's an attraction, there's a connection with Pluto. And Venus is a very social sign, not only social, like social in Libra, of course, because it attracts the people and the resources, that's Taurus, that we need to thrive. And so maybe, just maybe, what if this time around for the collective, for Uranus, for Pluto, that we have Venus that is totally supporting us, making things sweeter, making bonds deeper, bringing us together. And to me, this is what this is really about. Because, if we go down the fear mongering cycle of like the predictions of this time Uranus in Gemini, the decentralization of information, which we need, independent journalism, local networks, community-based innovation. Yes, but we also have these technological leaps of AI, which can go both ways. It's such a tremendous tool that can be used for war, that can be used for surveillance, that can be creating all kinds of like fake news for us, but it also can be used for good, for helping us with healthcare, helping us with quantum computing, helping us with individualized, cancer care, with gene therapies. Now, it can go either way. And so, what truth, and we'll be talking about how to use some of our discernment to figure out what is best for us. But if you're a change maker, you're part of creating history. History is not happening just to you. You have a part to play. If you remember my 2026 theme my 2026 theme, it is survival of the collaborative. Every one of us, you and I, ordinary people, have the ability to choose to show up and lead. There's no permission. There's no need to feel ready. We are ready. And so, of course, it's really beautiful timing that on, 8 years ago, when astrology was coming into my life to use for professional work, 8 years later, I have Astrology for Change Makers coming out, my first traditionally published book by Wiser Books. It's published date of September 8th, 2026. And of course, with that Uranian energy of a change maker, this book is all about coming back to your original design that was written in the stars so that you can show up with your leadership and contribute at this vital moment, pivotal vital moment in time. Now, change can't happen without your people. That's the old paradigm that, you're a lone wolf, that your success is dependent solely on your own willpower. That's such bullshit. Your success is dependent on your collaborative efforts, your community, your people, the ones who build circles and share resources and cross pollinate. And so, if you want to support Astrology for Change Makers, it's available for pre order right now in all of your favorite booksellers. And pre orders really do matter because when you have a strong pre order, you're signaling to libraries, to booksellers to bring this book into their world to share it with more people. So, why don't you already become a ripple, a change maker, and pre order my book, Astrology for Change Makers? We'll be releasing a bunch of like different bonuses and like different launch teams very soon. So, be sure to keep tuning in. So let's move on and really look at what the stars are inviting you into, of course, to shake up your circles, but really what we are here to discover as and disrupt what possibilities and evolutions want to emerge for us, and what we want to dismantle. So this part comes from my 2026 in the stars, my full report that I had at the beginning of the year to look at what's happening. And of course, I mentioned that Uranus and Gemini, the theme is about shaking up your circles. And this requires intentional work for us to move through and not get stuck in our old paradigms. If we stay stuck in the status quo and the old paradigms, you know what Uranus is going to do? Uranus is going to come up and slap you upside the head, because Uranus is like, change is going to happen. Are you going to make the change, or am I going to have to force the change on you? So let's take a look at how we can shake up our circles. And this is just general information before we deep dive into the Uranus and Gemini information. So, your invitation to shake up your circles. So, what do you want to break through? Now, I hope you want to break through your aligned communities. This is your ability to courageously find or create communities that match your values, match your vision, and match your desired growth and leadership. So, you got to get clear on what your values are. That was Uranus and Taurus. You had 8 years to do this. Get clear in what you desire and bring your people together who have those same aligned vision and values. And so, what you're dismantling on the opposite end, what no longer serves you, are your old outdated circles, staying with the same people, maybe the same friend group, maybe the same networking group, just because it's familiar. This doesn't mean that you have to let go of all of your friends or all your connections, but you need to update it and freshen it, and don't stay with people who no longer have the same values or vision as you, because they will only hold you back. Okay, next thing that you want your invitation to break through is to create meaningful cross pollination. What this means is to go deeper into collaborative connections where shared purpose creates real change. So, this is getting in rooms and courageously sharing your information. We talked about this earlier, so that new ideas can be formed. What we're dismantling is surface level connections, knowing a lot of people, but none of it feeling truly impactful. So if you're still focusing on vanity metrics and likes, that's what we have to dismantle as you shake up your circles. Okay, so the next thing that you're being invited into is to disrupt leadership. So, what this means, disrupting leadership, is to see yourself as a leader, not because of your credentials, but how you see the world differently. So, innovation takes courage. Shake up your circles by leading with new ideas. And your new ideas don't have to be you reinventing the world. Your new ideas literally come from your lived experience and your values. So, share how you see the world, your perspective, because you're letting go, you're dismantling, playing it safe, not wanting to disrupt, not wanting to try something new, not wanting to say, like, hey, I don't think that's the right idea. We are done with that. Okay. Now, in order to shake up your circles, this requires you to do some brave outreach, meaning you got to step out of your comfort zone. You got to step out of your isolation. This means connecting to the people that you're like, I need to know them. They want to know you too. Okay. And you're disrupting and dismantling going alone. You can't do this by yourself. You feeling disconnected, feeling alone, feeling, oh, woe is me, telling yourself that outreach is too risky is something that you absolutely have to dismantle and overcome. And lastly, I want you to up-level your communications. Find the most trustworthy channels. Where does your community hang out? Where are they sharing messages? Maybe you give up, Instagram and want to write longer form on Substack. Yes, write on Substack, but don't just write. Make sure you're commenting on other people's posts and creating those relationships. Because what we're dismantling is communicating in the old ways with ideas that have already passed. Of course, that should be a no brainer. All right. So I hope you feel inspired to shake up your circles, to invite people into your circles, to reach out to people that you didn't think that you could reach out to. This is your time to break through. So let's take a look at your astrology now. If you're still listening, thank you so much. I know this is a long episode, but I wanted to give all of this to you. Let's take a look at transiting Uranus in Gemini by house. You know that I'm a Placidus house person. I like the different sizes of the houses. I don't tend to resonate well with whole sign houses, but this can work for a whole sign as well. And so it's definitely easier to calculate with whole sign houses. But what I want you to look at with Uranus transiting through Gemini is I want you to see where Uranus is shaking up. Now, yes, Uranus moving into Gemini is a big collective shift for us, but individually, you're going to find the biggest shifts when Uranus moves into a specific house. I am certain of that. Or when Uranus transits one of your natal planets, either by, doesn't matter what aspect it is at this point. When Uranus is transiting one of your natal planets, you're going to feel it. And how you feel it is the aspect. So let's take a look at Uranus transiting by house. So I want you to look at where Uranus is by house in your natal chart. Look for Gemini of 0 degrees. Take a look at which house Gemini of 0 degrees is in. Okay, so if Uranus is crossing your first house and moving across your ascendant, this is one of the most important Uranian transits that you have because this is an energy of radical changes to yourself, your identity, to your leadership, the way you initiate and make change. This is breakthrough energy, and the glass ceiling is up to you. Okay. Now, again, Uranian energy doesn't always feel comfortable. It can be disruptive. It can be chaotic because it's changing the status quo. So this is where the inner work comes in to see how comfortable you can get with all of this uncertainty. Now, if Uranus is going to be moving through your second house or currently in your second house, this is your invitation to create radical changes to your finances, to your worthiness, to your values, and to break through the glass ceiling to elevate your finances and just what you appreciate. Now, not all of us are going to have all of these transits in our lifetime. Some of us are going to have all of these transits in our lifetime. But a Uranus second house is very similar to a Uranus going through the eighth house. Radical changes because both the second house and the eighth house are both money houses. Now, if Uranus is going to be moving through your third house, these are radical changes to your mindset, your inner dialogue, and your voice, as well as to your daily neighborhood routines. This is your invitation to break through your ability to express yourself and communicate your needs. If when Uranus is going through your third house, this is a time where you can really come up with a very disruptive and innovative message. If Uranus was going to be going through your fourth house and crossing your Imam Coeli, your fourth house cusp, this is a big changes to your emotional safety and your innermost private life for your family and for your home dynamics. This is your opportunity and invitation to break through intergenerational advancements and to create the emotional security that creates lasting certainty in your life. If you have Uranus that's crossing the fifth house at this time, I want you to look at how changes to your ability to seek out your passion and play and pleasure and creativity, breaking through the glass ceiling to heal your ability to receive joy and attend to your inner child. It's really interesting if you have Uranus aspect or transiting your fifth house or the 11th house on the opposite end, just like how we were talking about the second house, eighth house, you could have, surprise pregnancies like me. When I was close to my Uranus opposition, and Uranus is natally in my fifth house, as Uranus was crossing the 11th house, I got pregnant for the first time, the first and only time at 41, and I now have a 10-year-old child. If Uranus is moving through your sixth house, this is your invitation for radical changes to your daily practices, your routines, your wellness. And this is your invitation to figure out how to break free from obligations from like your boss or higher ups so that you can really attend to your own wellness and wholeness. If Uranus is crossing through your seventh house of relationships, this is similar to that first house. Your relationships are shaking up. And so, this is your invitation to take back your power in your relationships, in your partnerships, in your collaborations, and create and disrupt old patterns of people pleasing so that you can break through how you collaborate and relate to others. If Uranus is moving through your eighth house, of course, this is like the second house I said earlier, radical changes in your ability to transform and trust your inner power, to break free of old paradigms, and surprises in shared resources and joint money. Now, this is your opportunity to break through the ceiling of your relationship to life and death, as well as trust with others. If Uranus is moving through your ninth house, this is your opportunity to change and challenge your old beliefs, your old purpose, your old vision, even your own mortality. Not mortality, even your own morality and ethics. Oftentimes, if you have Uranus through the ninth house, your belief systems are about to implode or explode depending on where you are. Now, breaking your invitation to break free of this glass ceiling of believing what you can truly have, your possibilities, and your purpose. It's very moving. Now, for Uranus moving through the 10th house, you can see radical changes to your public and your professional life to achieve expertise and inner authority. This is your opportunity to break through and decide how you want to leave your mark on this world. Often, for like my business clients who, have a 10th house or a first house Uranus transit, big disruptions happen in their professional lives. However, this ultimately again moves them on their right path. At first, it might seem like a total like chaotic disruption. Oh, I lost my job or my business isn't going as well. But ultimately, where you end up with that quantum leap is so much better than where you are now. Uranus through the 11th house, radical changes for the hopes and future of your social impact, of your soul communities, of breaking through the glass ceiling of how you will contribute to society and achieve your dreams. This is where my Uranus was when it was moving through those first degrees of Taurus. And lastly, if Uranus is moving through the 12th house, these are radical changes to your innermost hidden self and past actions. This is your opportunity and invitation to break through to allow more ease, more flow, and bliss in this lifetime, as well as being able to see the true motivations in others. This gets you ready to rebirth again and get ready for Uranus to cross your ascendant, which, like I said at the very beginning, is one of the most impactful changes in your life when Uranus crosses your ascendant. It's a breakthrough and a rebirth. All right. Now, let's take a look if this Uranus in Gemini is going to be impacting any of your natal planets. Now, Uranus is a slow moving planet, and so it's going to go forward and it's going to go retrograde and it's going to go forward again. Uranus typically moves about 5 degrees in total over the course of a year. So it moves very slowly. And sometimes we want to rush through some of this transformational breakthrough revolutionary energy. But trust me, be happy that it takes the time that it needs so that you have time to integrate instead of something just being soul jolting. Now, because Uranus takes a while to move through the zodiac, when it pings one of your natal planets, again, 1 to 2 years, this energy is going to feel very, very disruptive because it's different. But you can take your power back and say, I am open to changing whatever Uranus is here to change for your life. So, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be looking at Uranus aspecting one of the planets. And we're not really going to be talking about the specific aspect, but you already know that the specific aspect, like conjunctions, sextiles, squares, oppositions, trines, they each have their flavor. Let's get rid of binary thinking of like good or bad. But, of course, a square and an opposition is going to feel more challenging than, say, a trine or a sextile. And so, know what the aspect is, know the flavor of the aspect, and apply that aspect, that flavor of the aspect, to this archetypal transit. So, for example, let's start with the sun. If you have a Uranus and Sun transit, this is a potent one. If you have a late degree of Taurus birthday, you've been feeling this Uranus Sun aspect. So we have Uranus breakthrough energy plus the Sun, the source, the creative willpower, the heart of yourself, your creative genius. Now, breakthrough and creativity being completely blended, all of a sudden now we have, how does ingenuity ring as a theme in your life? Now, the ingenuity, the flavor of the ingenuity, whether it's easeful or challenging, is going to depend on the type of aspect that you have. If you have a Uranus Sun opposition, there's going to be things pulling at you that create this ingenuity. If you have a Uranus Sun trine, this ingenuity is going to feel super, super supportive. And so, what is this for you? Now, Uranus and Moon, breakthrough plus security equals emotional reform. Of course, if you have a Sun Moon transit, your emotions are going through some revolution, some innovation, some change. And so, of course, the moon, your emotions, your relationship to women, your home life, all of the things that the moon represents is going to be going through some breakthrough and change at this time. I'm going to be having a Uranus moon opposition soon. We'll see what happens. Uranus and Mercury, breakthrough plus expression equals insight. How is your insight being disrupted? How is your insight being evolved? How is your insight being awakened? Of course, that aspect is going to show you the flavor of that change. Uranus and Venus, breakthrough plus connection equals a change in your relationships. So maybe there's evolved relationships, new relationships, like relationships that shake up your whole sense of being. Of course, the aspect between Uranus and Venus is going to show you how that relationship change feels. Uranus and Mars, breakthrough plus Martian activation equals volition. Volition is the power to act using one's will to make conscious choices or decisions. So, how has that been awakened for you? Of course. Oh my gosh, I just thought of this. I literally just had a Uranus Mars conjunction. That was not fun, friends, for me. This is also when I was going through all my big diagnosis. I felt like I had so many ants in my pants. I had so much energy and I didn't know how to use it quite yet. Not to scare you. That was just my experience. So you can choose a different experience. Uranus and Jupiter, breakthrough plus expansion, of course, equals progress. This is a wonderful transit to have. Of course, we all have a choice in how we want to experience this transit. So if you're having a Uranus and Jupiter aspect, a Uranus and Jupiter transit this time around, how is progress being made for you? Uranus and Saturn, breakthrough plus discipline and focus. Well, when we have this, it is time to dismantle. Both of these are breaking down boxes, breaking down the boxes that hold us in, breaking down these traps. We are literally dismantling structures that no longer work for us. Now, Uranus and Saturn together are generally not a comfortable energy. And so look at that aspect and see how that's working for you. I have a natal Uranus and Saturn trine. So dismantling and breaking through and making this kind of change is generally easeful for me because I'm like, how can I make this better for myself? Uranus plus Uranus, breakthrough plus up level. Okay, so we are most familiar with the Uranus opposition that happens between 38 and 42. And ultimately, this Uranus opposition wants us to have freedom. If you have a Uranus at return, congratulations, you have lived a wonderful life. And how can you return back to your natural state? Uranus and Neptune. Now, this is a very interesting one. Generally, we don't have Uranus-Neptune conjunctions in a transit because they move very slowly. But breakthrough and that's a generational thing. But if you might have a Uranus-Neptune in a different transit, breakthrough plus inspiration. If you're middle aged and you have Neptune in Sagittarius, like I do, you're going to be going through a Uranus Neptune opposition within the next 8 years. So you're having a breakthrough in inspiration, a unity vision. I mean, absolutely, this is going to be a spiritual awakening for you. And then Uranus, but then the oppositions, you get to choose. Oppositions are not always super easy. And so how will you choose to express that opposition and experience that? And lastly, Uranus and Pluto, breakthrough and breakdown in power. This is absolutely revolution energy. And so if you are a Gen Xer, you are going to have this Uranus-Pluto trine when Uranus moves through Gemini, because for the Gen Xers, we have Pluto in Libra. If you are an early Gen Xer or a late boomer, if you have Pluto in Virgo at those late degrees of Virgo, in about 8 years, you're going to have that Uranus-Pluto square. And so this is going to be a really big time where you reclaim your power. So for us Gen Xers, this is the aspect that we are looking for to reclaim our power. This is going to, the next 8 years, we're going to see a lot of Gen Xers, the silent generation, the hidden generation, the forgotten generation come through and take some of their power back. So very interesting. I've been talking for a long time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. What stuck out for you? What hit home for you? What made you go, I want to reflect and think about that a little bit more. So it's not all gloom and doom with Uranus moving through Gemini. We'll keep on checking back on Uranus and Gemini because, we got 8 years of this coming forward. First and foremost, reflect on Uranus and Taurus and what shifted and changed for you during those last 8 years, and decide how you want to experience this breakthrough energy with Uranus moving through Gemini. I hope that you decide to shake up your circle of friends because it's your communities. The stronger your communities are, the more successful you will be. All right, my friends, thanks for making it this far, and I will see you soon. So thank you again. If this podcast has touched your heart, please share it with others. Please leave me a rating and review so we can reach the hearts of even more change makers like you.